Okay, so before we pick up where we left off, I have a reading I want to share with you. A few months ago, I was reading this book. It's called Overload by Arthur Haley. It's a fictional piece set in the late 70s before the Arab oil embargo, and it's about the electrical energy production industry in California and how it was being taxed, and they were having blackouts, and there's this debate going on about whether or not new power plants should be built, whether they should be nuclear power, hydroelectric, solar arrays, what kinds of power should be built, and what the implications will be for society if they aren't built, what life without electrical power will look like, all of that kind of stuff. And then they mix in a little bit of domestic terrorism with it. It's pretty interesting. But this one passage really struck me. It's one of the executives for the power company debating with someone who is a director of what the book's equivalent of like the Sierra Club is, an environmental organization. Okay, and she's saying no to the expansion. We're going to fight you guys every way in all of the hearings. And he says, how habitable do you think the kind of world will be which I just described, with less and less electric power? She says, I think it might surprise all of us by being better than you'd think. More important, we'd be moving the way civilization should, toward less waste, less opulence, a lot less greed, and a less materialistic standard of living, which would be a good thing for us all. She continued, we've lived so long here with the notion that expansion is good, and bigger is better, and more is mightier, that people are brainwashed into believing it's true. So they worship gross national product and full employment, overlooking the fact that that both are suffocating and poisoning us. What was once America the Beautiful, we've created an ugly, filthy concrete wasteland, belching ashes and acids into what used to be clean air, and all the while destroying natural life, human, animal, and vegetable. We've turned sparkling rivers into stinking sewers, glorious lakes into garbage dumps. Now, along with the rest of the world, we're fouling the seas with chemicals and oil. All of it happens a little at a time. Then, when the spoilage is pointed out, your kind of people pleads for moderation because you say, this time around we won't kill many fish, or we won't poison much vegetation, or we'll only destroy a little more beauty. Well, some of us have seen it happen too long and too often to believe that old canard anymore. So what we've done is dedicate ourselves to saving something of what's left, because we think there are things in this world more important than GNP and full employment. And one of them is preserving some cleanliness and beauty, plus holding back a share of natural resources for generations not yet born, instead of squandering everything here and now. And those are the reasons the Sequoia Club will fight Tunipa and your Devil's Gate pumped storage plant and Fincastle geothermal. And I'll tell you something else. I think we'll win. What's she talking about? Negative externalities. Negative externalities. We would not consume as much energy. We would not drive as many miles. We would not use as much health care. We would not do a lot of things that we do if negative externalities didn't exist, if the costs of those externalities were included in the price we pay for what it is we consume and do. And I think you'll have a real understanding of that when we're done with this section. All right, so we were at this point where we had measured social cost. Yes, sure. I believe it. The grade book is up to date as of before last Friday.
Okay.
So if you turn 2 in, then you're good and you can erase yourself. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we were at this point where we had added the external cost and created what we're calling social cost, which is where we have the private cost and the external cost. Okay? So now we add demand in here. The socially optimal quantity is where demand and social cost intersect. So 20 gallons. Okay? At any quantity less than 20, the value of additional gas exceeds the social cost. Stop and think about that a minute. Optimal for it takes the negative externalities into account. Yes.
Wait, what is it when social cost needs to be?
That's optimal, the optimal quantity. Yep. At any quantity over 20, the social cost of the last gallon is greater than its value to society. So obviously it's going to be best at that social cost equilibrium. But if you're not going to be there, would you rather be to the left or to the right? Okay. So the market equilibrium is 25. And that's greater than the social optimum. And you guys just said you'd rather be to the right of the social optimum. What? If you aren't at the social optimum, then you'd rather be to the right of it. That's what you said. Do you still believe that? You would want to be to the left. You would want to be to the left if you're trying to avoid externalities. Okay. So what we want to do to eliminate externalities is somehow force the economy to move from this natural equilibrium to the social equilibrium. So how can you do that? One solution, tax everybody, $1 a gallon. That'll move it over there, right? Because we're at $2.50 now. If we add $1 tax, that'll spread it and put it right there. Follow? You getting this, Shell? Kettleson? Okay. So what we do, it's called internalizing the externality. Right now, it's called an externality because it doesn't affect us. It's outside of us. It's external to our understanding of the situation. Okay? To make it affect us, to make us aware of it, to force us to deal with the externality, it has to be internalized. It has to be brought into the economic equation. In order to do that, you have to alter incentives. Force people to acknowledge the external impacts of their actions. Let's go back to our crop dusting. Okay? I'm handing out papers, I crop dust you, and then I say, oh, I gotta run. And I leave. And you're trapped here. Right? If I can't leave, does that alter the equation for me? Forces me to stay and suffer the consequences? Okay? There's a great movie called Erin Brockovich. It's about a court case where the groundwater was contaminated through an industrial byproduct. And all of these families are suffering terribly from cancers. And the company that's doing the polluting is denying it. And in one of the scenes, they're sitting at the table doing a deposition. That's where you get them to come and give testimony on record before the court case. Okay? And the attorney and his paralegal, whose name is Erin Brockovich, have a pitcher of water and glasses of water on the table. And the guys, they got the temperature turned up a little bit, and he's starting to sweat. And he's, and they offer him some water and slide it across the table. And he's about to drink it, and they say, oh, and before you drink that, you should know we pulled that from the well located wherever near his chemical plant where one of these cancer clusters is located. And he kind of stops, and he puts the glass down and slides it away. They internalized the externality for him, didn't they? He's drinking water from somewhere else. Doesn't matter to him. His kids don't have cancer. Okay. So in our example, if we put that dollar per gallon tax on sellers, it makes the seller's costs equivalent to the social costs. The sellers are now having to acknowledge financially what the byproducts of their production are. So when the market participants, when the people doing the buying and selling have to absorb those costs, the social equilibrium is going to become equal to market equilibrium. We have to put those incentives in place to force the two together. I'm sorry, I've been calling it social equilibrium, social optimum. Social optimum. Okay, we'll fix myself. Okay. Now, in that scenario, we impose the tax on the sellers. Makes no difference. We can impose the tax on the buyers and get the same outcome. We either make it more expensive for sellers to sell what they've got, or we make it more expensive for buyers to buy what the sellers are selling. The end externality comes from the consumption of the gasoline. Doesn't matter who we tax. Ultimately, we want you to use less gasoline, reduce the externalities. Now, not all externalities are negative. There are a fair number of positive externalities in our world, and they're great ones. They are fantastic ones. In fact, I'd argue there aren't enough of them. Some examples of them. Here's a fantastic one. Vaccinations. Vaccinations. The fact that the vast majority of our population is vaccinated helps everyone. In fact, there is a vaccination that you have not received. It is an incredibly deadly and virulent disease. It decimated a huge percentage of the original population of this continent. Smallpox. You've not been vaccinated against smallpox. And you don't need to be, because everybody else had been, and effectively smallpox has been eradicated from this country. But it's not eradicated globally. Flu. How many of you have gotten the flu vaccine? Okay. A little less than half. A little less than half. Matthias, you didn't raise your hand. Matthias comes in, he's got the flu. He's got the flu. Comes in, fever. We can look at him and know the boy's not well. He says, oh no, I just had some bad chicken last night. I'll be fine tomorrow. Then he's gone for 4 days, and he sat in here and he coughed and he sneezed. And within the next week, a huge section of the class is gone.
Unless you have great immune.
Yep. But there's still a positive externality here, because everybody who had the vaccination theoretically doesn't get the flu because it's the exact same strain. And so then they don't get it and spread it to their other classrooms. Whereas those of you who didn't get the vaccination have picked it up from Matthias. With the flu, you're contagious even before you're symptomatic, and so you're spreading it. But if no one had the vaccination, 1 or 2 people come to school with the flu and stay all day long, and they spread it through all their classrooms. And Matthias will actually successfully infect people in here all day long, because he will have sneezed on that desk, coughed on the desk. He'll have sneezed and then touched the door handle. Let's say he sharpens his pencil. The hand sanitizer, I've watched people do this. They'll go up and they'll blow their nose one-handed, and then they'll and clean their one hand. Well, Matthias touched that pump with his hand too, before he had sanitized. Yeah. So, tuberculosis vaccination. You guys get the, or not tuberculosis. Not you don't. There's no TB vaccination. Tetanus. Thank you. Tetanus. Okay. The fact that you have to prophylactically vaccinate your dog against tetanus is a positive externality. The fact that the government requires that be done, positive externality. Can't license your pet without it. Okay. Oh, it is awful. Yeah, you die. Google it. Okay. Measles vaccination. Many of you, when you go to college, you're going to have to provide a shot record. You will have to prove that you've had a measles vaccination within a certain recent period of time. Sherm totally gave you away, Ethan, when I looked. You're suffering from, it's not FCS now, it appears to be FTS, fascinating thigh syndrome. Is it spreading? Is it? Yeah. The reason that colleges require that you have absolute proof of a measles vaccination before you set foot on their campus is that measles is highly contagious and fairly deadly and crippling. And it goes through a population that is densely contained pretty rapidly. Measles outbreaks on campuses are bad news. So they will absolutely require that with no exceptions. What? I want to say the teens, because we didn't have vaccinations. Since then, vaccinations have become very widespread, very common, and so there aren't outbreaks. But in terms of colleges, there are little localized clusters that'll pop up because there's an increasing number of parents who opt out of vaccinations. And so then when those kids are there, they can get the measles. And here's the really scary thing. Many vaccinations that we get have a span of effectiveness, and towards the end of that span, the antibodies are no longer as active in your body, and you could be susceptible. And so if you're at the end of your span, you could get the measles from someone who'd never been vaccinated and then spread it on. And so that's why they require you to have a very recent vaccination. Yes?
Wasn't there a big outbreak at some college not too long ago?
Yeah, Texas has had one. Oklahoma had one. There's been several little, not massive outbreaks, but localized clusters that are pretty scary.
Well, 2 years ago, someone closed their school for
Yeah. Meningitis is another one that kind of goes like that, too. Meningitis is, and I'm probably not going to say this exactly correctly, but it's like an infection of your spinal fluid. Very painful, massive crushing headaches, can kill you. It's bad. Okay. In the presence of a positive externality, our social value includes the private value and the external benefit. I showered this morning. So the social value of my shower this morning includes my personal cleanliness and the fact that I don't reek. That's the external benefit. There you go. Freshmen, some of them don't understand the external benefits of showering, and they don't care about the private value of showering. Yeah, they got the axe. Okay. Let's see. We mowed our lawn and raked up our leaves this week. the value of our home is preserved. Our lawn will be healthy and happy. And our neighbors who are trying to sell their house, we are adding to the curb appeal of the entire block. So we've improved and we've provided an external benefit for them. No. Yeah, yeah. All our leaves are down, but all of our neighbors have trees that are hanging on to them, and the wind blows. Okay, so the socially optimal quantity maximizes welfare. At any lower socially optimal quantity, the social value of additional units exceeds their cost, making it not worth it. And at any higher quantity, the cost of the last unit exceeds its social value. Think you all know what's coming next? Graph application. And you don't even have the lecture notes in front of you. No, it's, a lot of times the people who have the lecture notes printed out are like, a graph. Yeah. You just figured it out because you're that smart. The pattern works, though. Okay, so flu shots. Our equilibrium is $20, 20 flu shots. The external benefit is $10 a shot. Okay. We are benefiting society by $10 every time somebody gets a flu shot. Why? Because that person isn't going to get sick and spread it, and the spreading of the illness results in sick days, medical visits, pharmaceutical costs. Right? Increased electricity consumption because your home watching price is right.
How do you calculate your external benefit? That's my question. Is there a formula? Or is it
I knew that question was coming. Yes, and that's about a 300 level econ class.
yes?
So we don't have to.
So it's just given to us.
Yes.
What do you mean 300?
Yes. So this is like a 100 level, Econ 101. And then there's 201 and 301. Yo, this is intro. Yeah. In college, this would be intro to microeconomics. Future business majors, take note. Okay, so where's our social value curve going to go? $10 up. Where's that? Where? Supply is going to go up. It's always a supply is going to move to the left. Okay. Positive externalities come from consumption, not from production.
Is it always that way?
Almost always.
She said the word almost. She said the word almost.
Positive externality. It's like when you say trade makes everyone better, except for it doesn't.
Remember, there are a few absolutes here. Well, trade always makes everyone better off, except when it doesn't, and when it doesn't is when they're stupid.
It's like everyone's rational.
As long as they and use what they have a comparative advantage in. Right. Sharm, you have a question? You did have a question.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it doesn't not do anything to the supply because there's no like tax.
So far, we haven't applied any incentives. All right. So our social value is going to be here at $25 a shot, 25 shots. That's our optimum social value. Okay. So to internalize this externality, to actually make the externality happen, we don't tax positive externalities because we want to encourage them. We're going to subsidize them, and so we're going to decrease the cost of your shot. We're going to encourage more people to get their shots. You know how much my flu shot cost me this year?
Free.
It was free. And what do we say? 2 words?
Nothing's free.
Thanks, Obama.
Thanks, Walgreens.
Nothing's free is probably more accurate. Didn't you just
Actually, Obamacare does have a lot to do with that. The fact that inoculations and regular base healthcare and preventative healthcare are free. I'm not advocating. I'm just pointing out. Everybody always bashes. Yes.
Didn't you increase the price, or did you increase how much they pay?
We didn't increase the price. Well, okay. At the socially optimal quantity, the price is higher, as is the quantity. So it's a logical increase. Yes. We're just getting more people to get the shot.
So it's increasing the amount of people that get it, and not just
Right.
increasing the price. It's just how much they pay.
Well, we're going to cover this difference with a subsidy. So the government's going to pay that difference, not you.
So really, we're paying the same.
Yes, you're going to pay the same. More people are going to get it. We have more steps.
Okay, cool. Wouldn't it be $10? $10 for 10 shots. Yeah, it is. 10, 10.
Well, here it's 10 at the same quantity. But when you follow it up the curve, it's 5 for 5. It moved to 10.
No, she's saying like down on the graph at $10.
Yeah.
You get 10 shots.
Yeah.
But you're saying $10 a shot. The external benefit. Yeah, I still don't know what it doesn't involve how much it costs for you to get it. That involves how much the cost is taking place. Like, people aren't paying $10 per shot because they don't have to buy medicine. They don't have to waste work days.
Yeah.
I think is what they're trying to say.
Yeah. The benefit is $10 a shot, so we subsidize it at $10 a shot. Kavanaugh?
Even though the external benefit is $10, it only increases your quantity and your price by $5 or 5 units is $5.
Well, the social value is $10 higher. But then when we look at the socially optimal quantity, it's $5 higher. It's $5 more expensive than the equilibrium.
Oh, does that mean the cost of a shot is $5 or $15?
Yes.
Ah, I was right.
So it's actually less expensive to the consumer, thus encouraging more consumers to get the shot. We haven't gotten there. You guys are making a huge leap of logic before we've gotten there. I love that you're thinking it through and figuring it out. That's good, but you're going to start confusing yourselves. Chuck?
By making your market equilibrium equal to your social optimum, aren't you creating more externalities?
Yes, and that's what you want to do with positive externalities. We want more positive externalities. Positive externalities only help. But when we have a negative externality and we tax, we're forcing people to absorb the cost of that negative externality. And we're actually decreasing consumption and the externalities both. Yeah, this is the positive side of it.
I'm gonna go home and start thinking of hard questions to ask you.
I smited him on that one. I had that one. Okay. If we have... Oh, no, we're not anywhere close to being done. We're going to try. If we have a negative externality, the market quantity is larger than is socially desirable. If it's a positive externality, the market quantity is smaller than socially desirable. If there's negative externalities, we use too much of it. If there's positive externalities, we don't use enough of it. With the exception of Axe. And one could argue that that's actually a negative externality and not a positive one. Okay. So to fix an externality and to fix a negative externality, you want to make people absorb the costs. To fix a positive externality, you want to create more. You have to internalize that externality. So you tax goods that produce negative externalities. You subsidize goods that produce positive externalities. These are rules. Learn these, memorize them. You will apply them over and over and over again. Chuck? Yes. No. The externality is the air pollution from burning more gas. So if I make gas go from $3 a gallon to $6 a gallon, guess what you're going to do? Buy less gas, drive less, less pollution equals less negative externality. So what? That means you're actually paying the cost of the externality. The increased price, Chuck, is not an externality. The pollution is the externality. You're missing the fundamental understanding of externality here. Sure?
Like, I realize they don't tax gasoline. Well, they tax gasoline, but not. Do they do it because of this?
No. They don't tax gasoline because they're trying to reduce externalities. They tax gasoline because they're trying to maintain our roads.
Yeah. But what did they tax? Like, can you give us some examples of the tax externalities? Gas guzzler tax.
There are what are called effluent taxes. This is a good example for you to know. An effluent tax, E-F-F-L-U-E-N-T. If I've spelled it, that's probably a good indication that you should be writing it. Effluent, E-F-F-L-U-E-N-T. This is good, Bengston. This is good. Don't write it down. It's all right. An effluent tax is a tax on discharge. So you run a chemical plant, okay? And what you are doing is you are producing the rubber soles for sneakers. And in that process, you create a lot of contaminated water. And the government, the EPA, has said that you have to get that water to 80% of its prior cleanliness. So you brought in clean, pure mountain water, and you have to put out 80% clean, pure mountain water. You can still leave 20% pollution. And they'll say anything over that 20%, we're going to tax. And that's called an effluent tax, a tax on your polluted discharge. Okay? And so they are charging you for that externality. But who's paying for the 20% polluted externality? Society is, but only in the fact that our water is polluted. If we were actually paying for it, the company would have to produce 100% non-polluted water. And what would that do to your sneakers? Drive the price up. It would increase costs for the company. Yes?
In some, like, I can't remember if it's like Sweden or Norway, but they base the price of vehicles like on the amount of emission that they put out.
Uh-huh.
So like the most expensive car there would be like a Chevy Camaro, like,
Yes.
or something like that.
Or an over-the-road 18-wheeler cab would be incredibly expensive there. And that's why they have those nice little nifty day trip trucks with the tiny little cabs, and because they do those kinds of things in Europe. Yeah. Yeah. And so you say to yourself, well, why don't we do that here? Why don't we base the price of the cars on the emissions they produce? What? Our public transportation network in the United States isn't as efficient, and so consumers need to have some transportation. And if we charged If we made the price of our vehicles equivalent to the amount of emissions that they produce, that would price many, many, many consumers out of owning their own vehicle. And when there is no substitute readily available, you would debilitate society. What?
Subway is gross.
The subway is gross. Well, it depends on where you are. Many European subways are very nice. Okay, Madrid's subway is kind of dumpy, but it's also not a very good subway system. They have a lot better buses and trams in subways. Stay above the surface there. Go to Paris, go to London, go to Washington, D.C., and the subway's great. Okay. Public policy. Public policy. Government policy has a lot to do with how we deal with externalities. And Ethan's example of the, I'm going to say Scandinavian nations and their greenhouse policies, that didn't come from Volvo and Audi. They didn't say, hey, let's charge a whole lot for our cars because they're polluting machines. The government said, via the people, let's deal with this. That's public policy. Okay? So there's two approaches to dealing with externalities. Command and control. Okay? This would be Ethan's Scandinavian example. Limits on the quantity of pollution emitted. In California, you move to California, they're going to test your car. Before you can get it licensed, you have to go in and have it tested. It has to meet what are called California emission standards. If you've ever watched The Price is Right, you've heard that phrase, right? The California emissions package. Colorado has one of these too. Phoenix should. If you've ever been in Phoenix in the summertime, you cannot see across the city because the city sits in a bowl and the smog is bad. It's bad. So you can flat out say a car that produces more than this can't be on the road legally. I think they should steal your spark plugs right then and there. But they just say, no, we're not going to license you. Okay. Or they can say firms have to adopt particular technology to reduce emissions. There are also market-based policies that end up providing incentives so that the private firms fix the problem all by themselves without the government having to come in and say, do this. Okay. Let's say that Adam is a little piggy. His room is disgusting. All his mother asks him to do is bring his laundry down to the laundry room. She'll do it. She'll deliver it in a clean basket outside his door. But Adam is such a piggy, he can't even do that. And so for a few months, Adam says to Mom, I've been, my underwear's been falling apart. It's getting all holey and stuff. I need more underwear. So Mom buys him more underwear. So he just wears the new underwear instead of digging out the dirty stuff in his room and taking it down to the laundry room. Can you imagine what his room smells like? Ugh. Anyway, Mom eventually figures this out and implements some market-based policies. She simply refuses to purchase Adam any more 6-packs of Hanes. She has incentivized him to clean up his pigsty and deliver his laundry to the laundry room, to reduce the externality of the stinking cesspool that is his room, because it's beginning to leach into the hallway. Okay? Think of this as a corrective tax. How many of you have ever received payment for an excellent grade? Okay? That would be a subsidy, would it not? Because as excellent grades have externalities. Many of you who are seniors are searching for some of those externalities now. We call them scholarships. And so if your parents have paid you along the way, they have been subsidizing their future hope of acquisition of scholarships. Okay? What would the corrective tax on poor grades be? Student loans. Right? Or 3 letters. GED. There's your corrective tax. Yeah. Okay. Tradable pollution permits. This is what you hear about in the news sometimes called cap and trade. Cap and trade. This is something that the global community has tried to implement because there's this philosophy. There's in terms of industrial and economic development, you have established advanced societies like ours in Western Europe. We've got clean nuclear power, clean industry, okay? And then you have growing economies like China, heavily fossil fuel based, okay? They're still trying to build the market capital to be able to afford to move on to cleaner industries. And then you have emerging markets, kind of like India or some of the Western African nations, where they're just beginning to move to those really dirty industries and can't even think about clean. And so what the world in its meetings has said is that, well, we can't say, just because we're the advanced nations, that nobody can pollute. Because we polluted a lot. It's what it took for us to get to clean. And how would it be fair for us to say to those nations that are behind us developmentally that they can't? So what we do is we cap the amount that a nation can pollute. And so we, the United States, aren't polluting as much as our cap. So we can trade shares above that cap to a heavily polluting nation like China. They pay us for our extra space that we have to pollute. We get revenue, which benefits our non-polluting, and they get to go ahead and pollute so that hopefully someday they can get to the point where they can't, or where they don't have to pollute. It's called cap and trade. So you cap the pollution and you allow people to trade the right to pollute.